Hello, my name is Daniel Hodab, and we are having today in our study group the third session of the raw material with our amazing host, Gabriel Lugo. Hi, Gabriel.
Hey, Daniel, and everybody officially. Thank you, Daniel, for making this possible, and thank you, everybody who joined to make this possible as well. Otherwise, it would just be me talking, as I'm used to, lonely in front of a camera. Um, so, yes, we're going to cover session 3 today. I did mention in the chat group that I wanted to leave up to vote, so please, everybody, help me with this. This session is concerning pyramids, and one part of the session is describing the how they were built. And I put this in my slides, so it's there. But I want to see what you guys, if you do you guys want to talk about that and cover it in the slides? So it would just be more time in the slides, or would you guys want to skip over it? I'm not sure how we can vote, but yeah, that would kind of shorten a little bit the presentation. Again, this is just coming from my bias that the building of the pyramids are not that interesting to me, and so I can't really give too much insight or provide much insight on this. But again, I'm open to talking about it because I know it's an interesting topic, especially when we get into the studying of the raw material and we find this different way in which the pyramids were built according to or compared to what we think in our physics, right? So again, I don't know how we can vote, maybe in chat, raising hands. What do you think, Daniel? What can we do?
I think we're just doing it with raising hands. Either you take the hands up button for the reaction button, or you do it on your screen, making like that.
Or I can see everybody. Who wants to cover the building of the pyramids? Raise your hands.
You want to
Don't be
record it?
shy. Don't feel pressure by anybody not raising their hands. Okay, so we can still talk about it. I think it's interesting, but just
I really
I
interested.
guess is that you're interested, Yelena?
Yeah, it's method to geometric, right?
What's that?
Uh, the size and the height, the height and the angle, all those you are gonna to tell, or something else you aim for.
No,
Can you
I'm
hear me?
yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, but I kind of make out what you're saying. This session, um, other things. There's also capstone. What kind of
Mm,
capstone was there? I mean, I'll mention it, but I think the most part we are going to skip it. So okay. What other notes do I have for today? Okay, so this session starts with some commentary on what we would call maintenance and the methodology of the contacts. I won't be covering those because that's information about how to place things and uh, what do they do in general to the contact and the arrangement basically of the appurtenances, as Ron like to call them. But that's in the beginning of session 3, just so you know. What else do we have? There is a part where they Yes, there's a part where they talk about the unimportant of information like this one. And it's actually Don saying, this is question 6. Do I have anything on question 6 here? Let me see. I don't think I do. So yeah, in question 6, Don is, and I'll cover this because I think this is important to establish the personality of Ra and also Don's understanding of this. Because in essence, in this question, Don is saying that he knows that this may be of no importance to respect, what with respect to the law of one, about the capstone. That's the one that, again, I didn't cover. I think it's just sort of interesting information for those who are in the research of the pyramids. But Don asked about it, and he also asked about the something that Ra is not comfortable with, which is, could you correct my line of thinking? Should I be asking these questions? And in essence, Ra simply says, no, that's your prerogative. You are the one who wants to know, and we will answer the questions. They repeated this a couple of times, and they kind of emphasize it in other sessions when Don sometimes suggests the possibility of Ra giving an advice as to how to approach a topic. They reiterated very often, no, we're just here to give you information. Whatever you want to ask, we will answer, but we will not interfere basically with what you have in mind. And what do you want to ask? What you're interested in? We'll talk about anything. And I like that. That's actually a lesson that we can all take in terms of our communication with others. And I think there is some practical teaching in there, which is to be open to communicate with anybody. Just be an open book as much as you can. And there are limits, of course, that we as humans would have, but also in terms of how we learn to interact with other people. I think there is a core teaching there, or there's an essence to this approach to just be willing to answer questions as opposed to try to give, this is how you should be thinking, this is how you should be, and so on. I think that strengthens a little bit our ego or ways, which again, it could be well-intentioned, but our desires to control, basically. So yeah, Daniel, I don't know if I can share my screen. Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Done. Okay. I think this is a leftover, right? This is not in. This is session 2. Let me just make sure. Yeah, this is from. Never mind this slide. No, we're going to begin with question 9. The rest, again, it was about the capstone and what am I skipping? Capstone, maintenance and methodology, and how the blocks were moved. This, again, has to do with the building of the pyramids, so I'm not covering that. But this one I find interesting. Again, you guys know that I'm mostly interested in those parts of the material that inspire us into the inner work, which again, I think it's beautiful at the end when they talk about the functions of the pyramid. And that's precisely what we're all doing in a very controlled way. And I'll explain what I mean by a controlled way. But this is one part that I found beautiful. Did I jump to Ra here? Yeah, here, Don is in essence, I guess I'll skip the question, but he's asking about the question 9. This is if you move. Yeah, he's reminded of that, if we have enough faith, we can move a mountain. And Ra gives this answer in terms of faith. And they say that the vibratory distortion of sound faith is perhaps one of the stumbling blocks between those of what we may call the infinite path and those of the finite proving understanding. So this seems a little jumbled because of the wordings, but in essence, faith is the way in which we work from a true understanding as opposed from the finite understanding. And they also suggest the difference between these two when they talk about intelligent infinity, which I'll cover. But yeah, faith it's such a powerful word because it's an understanding that does not belong to the mind. The mind can only work with faith, but is not able to perceive faith as it is. So I found this beautiful out of the question that Don asked on how we can, move a mountain together and if we have enough faith. But the other part of this answer, when they say, you're precisely correct in your understanding of the congruency of faith and intelligent infinity. So there is a relationship. However, one is a spiritual term, that would be faith. The other, more acceptable perhaps to the conceptual framework distortions of those who seek with measure and pen. Intelligent infinity is more for the intellectual mind, and faith is more for the heart center, I would say. And yet they're both one and the same. It doesn't matter. It's like the path of devotion, we can call it faith, and the path of understanding or knowledge, then it could be intelligent infinity. And we can see what this evokes. It's almost the same thing, because if we think of faith, we know that is a knowledge that doesn't require explanation, doesn't require any formulation of the mind. We just know. That's faith. Whether we see it as faith or intelligent infinity is the same thing, because intelligent infinity is not something that you can understand or explain. It's still a sort of concept that we use to communicate or to talk about this. But intelligent infinity is it's still indescribable. Yes, it's referring to the same. It's not infinity that has life. It's not the inert infinity that we would probably think of in terms of physics or mathematics, which doesn't have any life. It's just a concept. So that's a difference. I think I will cover this. I'll skip the other questions, but moving to question 10. Yeah, so Don here, this is not the building of the pyramids. Okay, so here Don is saying, then if an individual is totally informed with respect to the law of one and lives and is the law of one, such things as the building of a pyramid by direct mental effort would be commonplace. Is that what I am to understand? Am I correct? And Ross says, the progress is normally from the understanding which you now seek to a dimension of understanding which is governed by the laws of love and which seeks the laws of light. I think there's more to this. So I'm skipping that part of Ra talking about the moving of the mountain by only one single mind, or there is also an explanation as to how if we were all, let's say, one individual with a purified mind could move a mountain, whether compared to, say, a group of people who may still have some distortions can basically do the same. That part is not here. What I really resonated with was this part of the answer where they're talking about the progress of how these are the dimensions or the densities in the law of one. Yes, so they're saying that the progress for us is that's our description right now, right? We now seek the dimension of understanding, which is governed by the laws of love. That is our path right now as third density. Then there is the seeking of light, which is the path from fourth to fifth density. And those who are vibrating with the law of light seek the law of one, so fifth density to sixth density. Those who vibrate with the law of one, Ra, for example, seek the law of foreverness. And they cannot talk about this because this is, in essence, beyond their understanding at this point. And I love that part when they, I guess in our terms, we can say they show their humanity or their limitations. When they say that we cannot say what is beyond this dissolution of the unified self, they just simply know that that's where they're heading. Of the unified self with all that there is, for we still seek to become all that there is, and still are we Ra. Thus our paths go onward. I think this is, I wanted to highlight this because it shows not only in terms of densities, like we are in third density, and so we're still, in the process of going there. I particularly don't like to see it that way because we are a microcosm of the whole universe. And so what we see here in terms of dimensions or densities, we see in ourselves as well as we progress in our crystallization of being. Let me explain what I mean, which is very simple, actually. Talking about third density, our experience of third density in the subdensity of our third chakra, that's our relationship socially. That's how we behave, and we are in third density and experiencing heavily this energy center of social interaction. That's what's progressing us into fourth density, but at the same time, it's activating our hearts, right? So it's not like we stop at the heart. We don't experience the other energy centers. We're awaiting other densities for this to happen. No, we are experiencing everything. So in the same way, our experience, even though it is in third density, our heart is opening so we can begin the spiritual work. And that's why we can be on different paths or, different steps of the path. Because that opening of the hearts provides the possibility for us to do spiritual work. And then these other experiences can begin to flow. And so we experience also the experience of communication, honest communication, or the expression of self informed by love. And also we begin to do the adepts work, which is of sixth density. This is the inner work. It's the constant going back to intelligent infinity and allow that to inform our reality, is to open up with every experience and allow this experience to go fully into the dissolution of self. And this is what it kind of, the way I understand it is that it crystallizes this particular manifestation or individualized portion of awareness, which is the self, the manifested self. It crystallizes it. Every one of us has a experiential continuum that is providing this energy for us to accept more and more, and that energy can be processed, through the whole energy centers, the whole energy system. So I found this useful and beautiful, and I wanted to share that. I think now I'm going to skip to question 15. This is why, yeah, 15. Let's go to question 15. There we go. So again, I'm skipping all the questions and answer about the building of the pyramids. Again, interesting stuff. You can go read it, but for the sake of time and discussion and dialogue, which I think it's more it's richer. These are the questions that I want to cover towards the end, which is the purpose of the pyramids. Why? Because that purpose, or the purpose of the pyramids, is actually what we are experiencing, this spiritual evolution. So in question 15, after all the questions and answers on the building of the pyramids, Don says, well, then you speak of the pyramid, especially the Great Pyramid, I assume, as primarily a healing machine, and also spoke of it as a device for initiation. Are these one and the same concepts? Really good question. Really good question. And Ross says they are part of one complex of love, light, intent sharing. To use the healing aspects properly, it was important to have a purified and dedicated channel or energizer for the love light of the infinite creator to flow through. Thus, the initiatory method was necessary to prepare the mind, the body, and the spirit for service in the creator's work. The two are integral. And I'm actually, I'm not going to say I'm surprised, because I kind of get used of how the universe works, but I love that Linda and Morris are here, because I thought about you guys when I reread this, and I remember your presentation and your teaching with Reiki, because all of that is present here. This is the process of healing. Yes. And so, at least in the pyramid, there used to be, there needed to be a healer that could help in this process. But like you guys said, it is you who heal yourself. It's not the healer. And that's also part of Ra's teaching in the raw material. So I thought about you guys, and lo and behold, you guys are here. Isn't that amazing? So, but okay, going back to this, what are we talking about? Healing and initiation. There's something interesting about healing that I'll talk about, which is reflected in the Law of One. And I just want to share my thoughts on that in a little bit. So keep that in mind. But to use the healing aspects properly, it's important to have basically a purified healer. We talked about this in session 2, where they said that the healer needed to purify itself, and that it was very difficult for people to get into the state to work, say, in the pyramid. So that was really important. And then the initiatory method was necessary to prepare the mind, the body, and the spirit for service in the creator's work. So that was the purpose of the pyramid, to initiate the person who was going through this process. And again, I would love to hear what you guys think of this, but I'll give my impressions on it. But so far, what we know is that the pyramid was built so we could have a structure or a system in which those interested, I think, those interested would go into the different chambers and undergo this process of healing, rather initiation, healing, and then came the rest. First the mind, then the body, and as I understand it, the spirit. And that's a question that it's going to come up in the next and final one that I have for this presentation. Even though Don's question is not exactly that, but he says, does the shape of the pyramid itself, and then he pauses and says, is that a key function in the initiation process? So the shape of the pyramid. I don't think Ra answers this specifically, meaning the shape of the pyramid, if it was important. We kind of know that it was needed because of the geometry of it. Again, this is just my live on it, that it would provide handling of the natural energy of the planet. Back in those days, it doesn't work that anymore because everything moves, everything changes. But that resonance, that frequency that was sustained in the different chambers, were able to alter, I would say alter the way in which we normally, or an individual, conceive themselves to be. I'll give my thoughts on that after I finish, but let me read what Ross said here. I have two more slides. They say, to begin, there are two main functions of the pyramid in relation to the initiatory procedures. One has to do with the body. Before the body can be initiated, the mind must be initiated. This is the point at which most adepts of your present cycle find their mind-body-spirit complexes distorted from. So it's interesting to see that before the body can be initiated, the mind must be initiated. And like Ross said, the majority of the adepts are in this process. Again, I have my own views on this, and I'll share them. But let's finish reading what Ross says. When the character and personality that is the true identity of the mind has been discovered, the body then must be known in each and every way. Thus, the various functions of the body need understanding and control with detachment. The first use of the pyramid then is the going down into the pyramid for purposes of deprivation of sensory input so that the body may, in a sense, be dead and another life begin. Now, I'm going to share what I think was the process. I'm not sure if this was the process, but this is what I gather. Somebody undergoing initiation, the pyramids would first go into this lower chamber. It was actually underground. It was accessed through a very small chute or tunnel. And that was designed to create a sensory deprivation environment. We know this very common practice of going into these caves or even a floating tank, right, where you can float in salted water or something like that. There are many ways in which we can deprive our senses and get into the state that, in a way, breaks the feeling of me being a body, and it brings you more into your mind because there is less stimulus for the body. So that was the first use of the pyramid. After that, there was the Queen's Chamber, where there is initiation. My understanding of this is that, and again, I could be wrong there, so please use your discernment and your own knowledge here, but I feel that in the Queen's Chamber, everything that you thought you were mentally was going to be completely taken out so you could see your true self. This could be in various ways. I'm not sure how that happened, but there seemed to be a sort of death of identity at that point. That would be in the Queen's Chamber. Through this death of identity is where a new self starts to arise. Then the healing chamber, which is the King's Chamber, to me is just a reconfiguration and going back into reality, just returning into, we could call it the physical world, the incarnation, and seeing yourself as something completely new. I think this was the initiation. Then it was the body's opportunity to be known, like Ross says here. This would be the second part of initiation, the body. But first is the identity that we think we are. And I think this is very similar to, this is what I wanted to share. I think the workings of the pyramid are sort of similar. At least they need to share something with the plant medicine that we know, especially now with so much research going on. And plant medicine does something similar. It seems to break down our sense of identity. The thing is, and I guess that's the caution that we wish there was more in our society, is that you need to have somebody qualified, somebody that could guide you in this process, because we don't know what may happen in there. We don't know what we have inside, right? And it seems like a very radical way to undergo this death of the conceived self. And however, I think that that's something similar was happening in the pyramid. It was a radical transformation that, because of the experience that it was provided through the different resonating chambers of this energy that was channeled or spiraled into the pyramid, it would create this mental environment to get rid of everything that was unnecessary for yourself and get in touch with your true self. The healing that was needed, of course, was that which we also go through. Now, here's the parallel that I see with at least the method that I am more associated with, that I'm more in love with, which is the direct path. We initially begin this inquiry into the self by having a very convincing feeling that we are a body and a mind. That's what we think we are. And we see other people as bodies and minds. So we first question this. And in a way, we're creating a sort of death of the identity with body and mind. Exactly what's happening here for the body and the mind. Through this disassociation with body and mind, which is self-inquiry itself, it's constant self-inquiry. The same thing is happening. We're going through the sensory deprivation chamber and also the Queen's chamber through this self-inquiry, constant questioning on who is the one who suffers, who is the one that is happy, who is the one, who am I? And you continue to do this. This is, of course, a more gentle way than to do it with aids like pyramids, psychedelics, or any other method of igniting this process. But then after you understand fundamentally that what you are is this oneness, and even the word oneness, I think is too trite at this point, but this pure being, it's pure being. Everything that you think you are is preceded by pure being. Being comes first. Awareness, we call it the one infinite creator. That is what we understand, right? So these two chambers are already taken care of. But then the third one, which is healing, needs to happen. You don't, as it were, become enlightened, and suddenly everything changes. I think very, very small population of the world may be triggered this way, and we have known cases like this. And even still, they go through a healing process. They just go through it very fast. But the vast majority of us, we go through a process of gradual healing. So that's the healing that I believe what's happening in the King's Chamber, probably accelerated. But this healing in our method, in our self-inquiry method, what we do is constantly observe and bring awareness to our conditioned patterns. All those things that our ego, our sense of identity keeps bringing up and keeps offering to us as our limited identity. So healing needs to happen. This is what we go through with emotional guidance work, shadow work, and everything else that has to do with liberating ourselves from the shackles of the ego. So that's what I would say was happening in the pyramids. I think it's very helpful to see it everywhere, because that's what we're undergoing. And I don't know if I missed something else that I wanted to mention with this slide. Oh yeah, so a couple of notes on this. Where is this? Here we go. See, we also know about this sensory deprivation when we go into caves. For example, we know that there's the classical yogi or guru who's not a guru at the time, but just goes to a cave and just resides there, and they're going through the same process, sensory deprivation, and then working on the mind, knowing themselves through initiation of the mind. And then happens that part that, did they say it here? Or was it in the other one? Where the body, before the body can be initiated, the mind must be initiated. There we go. Before the body can be initiated. Here, I'm opening my speculation again to share with you guys. But my view of this is that, for example, we see that there are many physical practices that are out there, and they are deemed to be spiritual. So a lot of people go through these practices, and one of them is, for example, hatha yoga, which I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but I feel like globally it has been accepted as a sort of exercise that people do. And I remember Krishnamurti in the 70s talking about this and saying, we should just call it exercise. This is not yoga. Yoga is meant to be union. It's the union with the divine. But still, these practices, they have their reason to be there. There's a connection with the body that needs to happen. So regardless of whether we do it in one way or another, we know that these practices obviously have a purpose. Third eye activation is another one that we see a lot in New Age. Like, you're going to activate your third eye and so on. These are all like physical practices. Many practices or exercises for taking care of your body. There's Kriya Yoga. There is the retention of your sexual energy. There is a lot of these things that belong to a sort of initiation of the body. But what I find curious is that these exercises are being done prior to the initiation of the mind. And that's why we see so much frustration. In fact, I would even dare to say, and I am the first one to admit that the practice that I love the most, which is a practice with the body, is to just simply sit, which we call Shikantasa in the Zen tradition. That's a physical practice, if you see it that way. And so we can spend 20, 30 years of a particular practice expecting something to come out. And I think that's the issue, that we need to first initiate the mind. And the process of initiating the mind is to go through this, precisely what they describe here. We need to disidentify ourselves from body and mind to recognize the true essence of who we are. And from there is where we come back to the world, heal, and at the same time, this initiation of the body will happen. That's when all these practices, it's not that they begin to work, because they could have been working in the past. They have a value, but they can now be seen from the real point of view, from the truth of our being, and see, oh, this is why I should take care of my sexual energy. This is why I should take care of my pineal gland for third eye improvement or whatever, my diets, my exercises, every single care for the body and the mind that we are suggested to do in the spiritual path. So that's what I find very in consonance with what Ra is saying here. And yeah, so all of these things are part of what we call healing. Again, the one last point that I wanted to mention, because we're talking about healing, right? Healing and initiation. A phrase came to my mind today when contemplating this session. And it's something that Ra says several times. And is the phrase, as you call this distortion. If you look this up, you will find out that I think 80% of the time, probably more, they said this every time they refer to healing. So to me, and again, this is just my personal view, to me, when they say this, as you call this, as you name it, they're saying in essence, that's how you see it. That's not how we see it. So how do we see healing? I recorded a video today for my channel talking about magic. How do we see magic? Magic being an anomaly of the consistent behavior and patterns of the physical world. That's what we call magic. But in truth, this whole reality is pure magic. It's not those anomalies. So this world is the most beautiful magic that it exists. The fact that out of nothing something can come out, that is to me pure magic. You see? And so in the same way, healing, we tend to see healing as a sort of fixing of myself. But the only fixing is happening from the perspective of a separate self. From the perspective of the true self, what's happening is a recognition, an enlightenment is happening, an understanding that's coming out from that point that we talked about at the beginning. Faith, intelligent infinity. So I love that they say, as you call this distortion of healing or pains or things like that, because they see it from a different point of view. So healing, in essence, is just returning to your natural state. Healing is recognizing your perfection, your beautiful individuality, which is really what comes out of this. I think they mentioned something in this session, and I think I read it. Yes, so right here, right, when they say, when the character and personality that is the true identity of the mind has been discovered, then the body can be initiated, basically. But you see, when the character and personality that is the true identity of the mind has been discovered, that happens in the healing process. When you heal yourself, you become a lot more joyful and open and less worried and so on. You know, this, but it's not just that. Something else is taken over, which is your magical personality, we can call it maybe. That's probably not congruent with law of one vocabulary, but yeah, you know, you become this joyful person and peaceful. So yeah, I'm rambling at this point, and I guess I will say nothing more, but just leave it open for dialogue at this point. That's all I had to cover in the session. There are two more questions that have to do, obviously, about maintenance and the usual closing statements, and that's it. I won't be covering that. That's all for me.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. If anyone have a question, that is the right time to ask now. Okay, Gabriel, what? Yeah, somebody.
Oh, I have a question, if I
Yeah,
may.
Joe.
Well, I'm kind of thinking, well, what went wrong? Why did some of the Egyptians go through this healing process and then decide to keep it for themselves? If they were becoming truly enlightened, they would want to share it.
Yeah, it's a very good question. We can only speculate. What we do know about this is that, in a way, they created a hierarchical structure, like a sort of, you know, Vatican hierarchy, you know, in which some of the priests were at the top. I'm not sure how or why. And I think this is also, this is a very good question, Joe, because I feel that, well, first of all, let's backtrack a little bit. Ross says that the law of one blinks not to the positive or the negatives, basically. It offers itself to everybody. So once you discover who you are or what you are, I feel that there is a strong possibility for us to polarize in any way. I don't think this was enlightenment per se, but it is a opening to know who you are. And from there, you can probably decide, you know, what to do. Do you want to serve others, or do you want to, you know, control others? Was there maybe a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Governor is not the one at the time. A pharaoh or somebody who was in charge, an elite that realized what was happening, and because they had some sort of control, physical control, they order them what to do. I'm not sure. But I guess the lesson here is that regardless of what we go through, there is still the possibility of polarization. in any case. And it also highlights the naivete of Ra, which they did mention and said, we thought that this was going to help them because in our naivete, we thought that this, this would enlighten everybody, but it just didn't. And we reflected this over and over again in our culture. So yeah, I don't think knowing yourself, and in fact, I would even say that right now there are many who have this so-called knowledge of self, and they behave in ways that are pretty unkind and not very constructive in the world. And they do seem to have a certain knowledge of this. So what went wrong? I don't know, but I just know that there is a tendency for us to distort things to the negative side because some remnants of this ego, it's still there. The healing process maybe didn't go as well. Some people just over-identified with the ego at that point. I don't know. I just know that it just went to the left side.
I think is it Benny wants to say something
Morris,
about
what did you say?
Yes. Hello, friends. I'm happy to be here.
Okay,
I wanted
Benny.
to say something. We know of 3 instances where higher intelligence worked with us. The first one was that of Jehovah or Yahweh. And that also went south pretty much. It did not go as intended. There is a part where Ra says that later they learned that their methods were not appropriate for this planet, which seems to be exactly what it is. And then I like to point out that one example where Charlie Hickson was captured or taken aboard the UFO by the entities from Sirius. We have to really think about what they did. These entities from Sirius planned beforehand to build a craft or to have a craft, to put themselves in some kind of hypersleep, travel thousands and thousands of light years to capture someone who has been intensely involved with war. So this concept of war and the very special things that are happening here on this planet are very, very unique. Entities travel light years to experience war. It's something crazy for people to see what can happen. And I really do believe that as Ra has also said before, that Earth, this is unique to the space-time continuum. It's our planet Earth with all of those different people here. It is something that nobody really worked with before. And we have people coming, having the best intentions, and they just go south. They came here and they wanted to help us. And they thought, well, okay, we know how to do that. We did that long time. We have to remember, these guys are 6th density. Millions and millions and millions of years of experience. And then they come here and say, oh, well, sorry, I didn't expect that to happen. So we really have to understand how unique we are and how unique our planet is. I think that might be quite helpful in figuring out why things just didn't work, because it just never been like that before. Nobody knows what's happening.
Thank you, Benny, for your comments. Very interesting.
And I say I love your intervention, Benny. Like that was right on the mark. Just the fact that we have motility, like we move, it's something that could be really interesting, that we cannot stop moving, for other entities. And yeah, I think that in many cases, we have given, or we have been given tools, and every time we are given tools, we turn them into war. It's just, we have the ability to say, wow, this is very useful to kill other people and to subjugate other people. So yeah, I know that this is actually, this could be sensitive for some people. I don't mean to make a light joke out of this, but it's the truth. We do this with our tools. And once again, I think we should we are invited also to take a step back and say, this is what awareness is doing. And this is a very intense experience. I think Ra suggested too many times already that before the veil of forgetting, which is what precipitated this experience, at least it has been intensified in our own design in planet Earth. To put it in mundane words, it was very boring. It's an experience that was very boring. And we can imagine, you know, if we are going to commit to, I don't know, say a video game, and we're just going to stay in that video game for a while and it's boring. Now we want something intense. But yeah, from the perspective, and I think this also explains beautifully how wanderers feel so shocked in this planet. Wanderers come here and they say, what is this madness? What are people doing here? I've never experienced something like that, you know, and it's just crazy. So yeah, it's, I love your intervention, Benny. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we will go to Morris now. Hi, Morris.
Well, I've got comment on two issues here. One about the distortion of the message in Egypt, and the other on Charlie Hickson, that responding to Benny. What happened, Rob brought this information, and they're dealing with third density entities that still have to make a choice. You had a priesthood. The priesthood distorted Ra's message because knowledge was power. The priesthood had that knowledge from Ra, and the distortion was they controlled it. So it was that control or service to self function that was developing among the hierarchy of the priesthood. They distorted it. We've seen the same distortion of spiritual messages in the Christian church and in Muslim and even in Buddhism to a degree. So this is just part of the third density experience. Is it's a time to make a choice. Ra comes in. They'd developed on Venus without the bellicosity that we have here, the degree of self-service that we have, quite a lot of that on Earth. So that's what happened in Egypt. It was the self-serving people that distorted the message because it helped them gain power and control over people. Now, as far as Charlie Hickson, we're going back to Benny. I met Charlie with Don in Arkansas when Don had brought in Leo Sprinkle to regress him. And this is where we learned about the experience that Charlie had and what happened when he was on board the ship. This was actually a fourth density civilization that had the technology to move. It didn't take them thousands of years to cross space. They had the technology to fold space. They had a pre-incarnative agreement with Charlie. Charlie was going to experience war. These entities had evolved from trees. They'd never experienced bellicosity. So they had this pre-incarnative agreement with Charlie for Charlie to share his experience with them so that they could share it among their population, their social memory complex, to understand what war was all about.
Well, thank you, Morris, for adding that information for us into your comment. Thank you very much. Then we have Hildu.
Hi, thank you so much all for being here. Very, very good listening. I think Joe's question was not very good. And to me, it comes spiritual ego, and that even though we do have a spiritual awakening, we're still human. And I've seen it happen so many times when people have a spiritual awakening, all of a sudden they're superior to others. And it's like you're just there and then you lost it. It's like it happens like this. It's really a huge trap and it's very sneaky, because I see ego is working with the subconscious, and it's just like lurking around, trying to find little holes to, and for me to keep it in check, I have to do a self-inquiry every evening when I go to bed. And even though I do it, and this has become a habit for me for over a long time, sometimes I'm like, to look back and then I've been dishonest with myself in certain areas unconsciously. So it's a lot of work to keep your ego intact and spiritual ego and not fall into this trap. So yeah, that's my take on it. That's it's like it's for me that's what came at least. Thank you.
Edel, I'd like to respond to you just for a moment because you're absolutely right. As people begin to wake up and feel enlightened, it does sometimes lead to that sense of superiority. But true enlightenment actually makes one more humble.
So I also, one of my commitments is to normalize this perhaps too heavy of a word, enlightenment, and to take away the word enlightenment out of the pedestal. So one of the things that I do is that I think it's important for everybody to keep in mind is that there is never an enlightened being. That's just the way we like to perceive from the separate self, that there are things that are not enlightened and that there are things that are enlightened. It's a dual perspective of reality. There is no enlightened being. However, there is enlightened experience. And this has nothing to do with a particular method or something. The natural behavior of humans is enlightened. When you are acting in a confused state, that we can say it's not enlightened. And so when we go in this process, like Hildur was saying, we will find that we have a lot of unenlightened behaviors. Or if we take the word out of such a heavy word, and we just say confused behaviors. And then there are clarity, behaviors with clarity, with true understanding. Then those are what I call enlightened experiences or behavior. So it's just us acting from a place of truth and understanding. And it's not even an us, it's a happening. What we call ourselves, it's a self-reflection. So it's not us. It's actually what's happening at the moment. This opens up so many answers to questions that we have of, should I be behaving in this way or another? Only you know that. And it is your job to see if that's coming from a place of honesty and truth. So yeah, I think at any point, whatever it is that we self-project and then reflect with that, that can be taken as obviously an ego. And it doesn't matter, you can be totally in line with a behavior. And as soon as you reflect yourself as being that particular thing, especially if it's so spiritual, you can get, you can get aggrandized and so on. So yes, like Morris said beautifully, this keeps you humble, ever more humble. And it's just that eroding of me as an entity, as a being. I mean, why would I even call myself enlightened if I know that I am that which is happening? So to call myself enlightened is to call everything enlightened. So the word is meaningless at this point. There is just this happening. So the mind doesn't get confused. It's just doing what it does. And that's pure acceptance. That is compassion with everything, understanding. So yeah, I would substitute that. And even understanding, I would just say, knowing who you are. That's the ultimate truth. Everything else is just relative truth. Only the knowledge of self is the true understanding, which is undeniable by anybody. Nobody can deny the ultimate grounds of the self.
I think Benny wanted to comment or have a question. Benny?
Yes, hello. First of all, I want to say something to Morris. Hello, Morris. I've read your name many times, and I am very honored to meet you in person. It's really wonderful. Hello. I just wanted to say that. And then I wanted to share why I believe what I said, where it is based. And in session 815, the question is, was the landing at Pascagoula in 1973 when Charlie Hickson was taken aboard this type of landing? And then says, I am Ra, the landing of which you speak was what you call an anomaly. It was neither Orion nor our people in thought form, but rather a planet entity of your own vibration. And that's where it comes. Our own vibration is the third density. So they're of third density, which came through quarantine in all innocence in a random landing. And then we go further, H22. What was the home origin of the entities that took Charlie? These entities are of the Sirius galaxy. So he offered that. And then in session 51.2, Don is very interested in the modes of travel, on how guys travel through the universe. And Ra responds, firstly, there are a few, again, third density entities who have learned how to use craft to travel between star systems while experiencing the limitations you now understand. So while they are the way we are, with our bodies, limited in third density, without connection to intelligent infinity, they're just third density beings, just like you and me. As I lost it. However, such entities have learned to use hydrogen in a way different from your understanding now. These entities still take quite long durations of time, as you measure it, to move about. However, these entities are able to use hypothermia to slow the physical and mental complexes in order to withstand the duration of flight. Those such are from Sirius are of this type. So I do show, and I would like to stand by it, that we are so special that these guys take all kinds of things to come and experience what we have here. We are never seen before experiences. It must be, they must be looking at us and going like, what's going on over there? That's really what it must be from the outside point of view. Yeah, that's what I wanted to offer.
Thank you, Benny. Morris, when you want to comment anything, feel free to do so.
No, I think Benny has done his research quite well. I recall the regression with Charlie. That was actually in the late 70s in Arkansas, the UFON conference. But you just read Ra's responses and use of that example. So thank you for sharing that, Benny.
Thank you, Morris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. If there are no any further questions so far, though, I will just ask Gabriel to give us some closing words. Maybe a forecast for next week.
Can I? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Benny.
Yeah, I wanted to offer something to the group which I had found about the pyramids. It's not the inner work. It's something that has, for me, greatly strengthened my faith in the words of Ra and in the words of the Confederation in general. I only have it in German, sadly. There is a German university material scientist. His name, I'm going to post the link in of his video and his books in the chat. He's a material scientist who works in Hamburg, and he examines all kinds of materials, from metal to rocks He's really into that on a very high level, and he's interested in the pyramids. And he went there to look at it and to discuss it. And if we remember, Ra says that the pyramids were created in place. So they thought about it and the rock appeared there. They call it everlasting rock. And when you look at it, it's he goes there and he shows very detailed pictures where you can see that they have the individual blocks, and every rock has a certain coloring inside of it. Like when you look at marble or granite, it's not the same color everywhere. It has a certain shape inside of it. And when you cut it in normal life, there would always be a little bit would turn into dust, and you would not be able to put that shape together again, the coloring of it. And he goes and can very, very clearly show that in the blocks of the pyramid, they have been cut and placed without any form of loss in the material, which to him was absolutely mind-blowing. And he writes books about it, and he even went so far to go on a TV interview to really put himself out there and say, hey, look, the pyramid was made without any loss. How did that happen? So I'm gonna put that link in there for anyone who wishes to see that. It's a real world example showing that what Ra is saying can really be seen and looked at, and you can convince yourself from a third party who is 100% on the scientist side and very far away from any, I don't know, spiritual mumbo jumbo, if you want to call it, in the real world. No? So I'm going to put that in the link for you guys.
Thank you, Benny. You may also put it in the book section of our Telegram group if you wish to.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
So thank you, Benny. Then we have one more question from Martin or comment.
Yeah, something different, not to do with the last subject, but coming back to some of the things that were discussed previously. A couple of things that I wrote down sort of have to do with having to do things in a certain order, as into making sure that we are properly prepared to take a next step on our own path, or in the path in the bigger sense. And I think that is actually underestimated in, let's say, the modern, all sorts of modern spiritual practices that are, sometimes can come across as superficial and focused, for instance, very much on the body without preparing the mind first. And I think that this is actually to do it properly, you need to go through certain steps. Not that it is a one size fits all. It's not like a recipe. Everyone has to follow the same steps, but more as in you have to be ready to get to a next stage in your evolution, in your expansion. Gabriel rightfully says that the word enlightenment, it is misused in many ways. I've always understood the word enlightened more as in the ability to hold light, the ability to hold more light. So if you become more enlightened, it means that you can hold more light, you can hold more intelligence, you can hold more love. But in order to do that, you first would need to create that space. You can't just shove it in there and then under pressure try to expand. And I'm sorry, now I'm rambling. That's why I think that what Ra was talking about, let's say that the mind comes first, then the body, then the spirit. You cannot heal the body, you cannot work on the body, you cannot expand the body if the mind is holding you back, if the mind isn't properly solved, properly ready. And in a bigger sense, like, we cannot become the creator if we don't understand ourselves, and if we haven't accepted ourselves. So that they're not very rigid steps, but they are in a certain order. I don't know how you feel about that. But these are some of the things that I've written down, and also in response to some of the other things that were said. I think that when spiritual ego, for instance, comes into play, this often happens when people are busy with practices that they aren't ready for, where, for instance, their mind, the ego is really holding them back while they are doing practices that they simply do not have the space for yet. I'm not being very specific here, but I hope you can understand what I'm saying.
I think we all do, Martin.
Okay.
Actually, we'll make some comments on that. Yeah, you see, even something that Ross said, the body is the creature of the mind. So how do we conceive our minds? The way we conceive our minds, then our body will be that. So yes, clearly the mind has to be initiated first so the body can undergo the changes that it needs to go through. One thing that definitely comes to mind is the following. When we think of the body, I would suggest, or I would say that the vast majority of people, including us, we think about this physical body, right? That is the body. But that's not true. That is a limited perspective. That limited perspective will always enclose you in what we call the physical human body. The body is the whole universe. And I guess it depends on, how we perceive ourselves to be. That will be the limitation. So something interesting happens, and I can only share a glimpse of experience in my own path as to the detachment of the body, mentally at least. That is, it's a process that begins to happen, that you don't see the body anymore as something that is essential. You don't see the body, the fears that we collected over decades towards the body, they start to disappear. So there's a change happening in how you perceive your body. This is totally congruent also with the energy systems, if you think about it. If your awareness is rising from the focusing and concentrating on the lower energy centers, which obviously have to do with the material world, first, second, third density, this which I am made out of, and it starts shifting to a more truthful understanding of yourself, then the body just becomes, as we rightly say, a vehicle. Let's put it this way, we don't concern with our bodies in dreams or in imagination, right? We don't care about the body. We just know that it's a necessary point of view. So raising this awareness to the truth, which is not even a higher body. We don't have a higher body. Those we can embody if we want to, but we don't have a true body. It's only what it's deemed appropriate for the experience. So yeah, I think every one of us will begin to see this association with the body, that